Hello, and welcome to the webinar, 3 Must-Have Components for Successful Ransomware Recovery. My name is Eric Wallace with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have a few administrative details to share with you, then we'll dig into our presentation. First, we would like to thank Rubrik for their partnership with today's event. They've been wonderful thought leadership partners to Argyle, and they're committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. Thank you again to Rubrik. We appreciate you joining us today. We welcome you to stay connected during today's event. For those of you who are active tweeters, please follow us on Twitter at Argyle Exec Forum. I also wanted to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we've curated based on the feedback we've received over the years from our members. Argyle is very proud and protective of this policy, as it reflects our commitment to ensure the neutrality and overall value of the content presented at our events. We've worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during the session today, and we appreciate our members' support of this policy. Finally, and most importantly, please submit all questions that come up during today's event into the chat section of the interface. Before we begin our discussion, I'd like to introduce our panel, then we'll begin. Today we have Kristina Avrionova, Principal Product Marketing Manager at Rubrik, Robert Hamilton, Senior Director of Product Marketing, Rubrik, Kev Johnson, Technical Marketing Architect at Rubrik, and Kim Lambert, Principal Product Marketing Manager, also at Rubrik. Panel, over to you.
Welcome to our webinar today. I'm Robert Hamilton from the Rubrik Marketing Organization, and joining me today are my colleagues Kim, Kristina, and Kev, the 3 Ks. Hey, before we get started, I want to tell you a quick story. It was 4 a.m. in the morning, May of 2021. Matthew Day, CIO of Lang's Building Supplies, was excited about a long anticipated holiday after 14 months of lockdown due to COVID. His wife was thrilled. All of his friends he was going to go visit, ecstatic, hadn't seen in a long time. But the day took an unexpected turn. Instead of waking up delighted to leave for his getaway, Matthew awakened to every CIO's worst nightmare, the dreaded phone call. We've been hacked. So We've Been Hacked is our theme today. I'm going to talk about some new research we've just completed regarding cyber attacks and the human toll that they take. Then Kim is going to discuss a new approach to security that helps solve ransomware attacks in particular. And then Kristina is going to introduce a new product from Rubrik. And then Kev will show you a demo of how Rubrik can help you boost your data security and recover from a cyber attack. But first, let's take a look at a couple of other attacks our customers have reported to us. I'm going to play a short video interview with Payette. Payette's an award-winning architecture firm on the East Coast of the US, whose mission is to create buildings of purpose. Payette's architects have shaped cutting-edge, 5.5 million square foot science centers to world-changing hospitals around the world. Let's listen to Dan Gallivan, Director of IT at Payette.
The attack occurred on a Saturday morning. What we thought was a routine power disruption, we quickly realized this was different. It's not just dollars per hour of missed billings. We really look at it as we could see construction deadlines missed, we could lose client reputation or faith in our services.
And finally, I want to share Southern Louisiana Community College's story, a system that serves over 10,000 students. Nick Petrie, Director of IT at South Louisiana Community College, he had a funny feeling something was brewing. The Ryuk ransomware variant had been making its round at colleges, and so he knew it would not be long before SLCC was probably also targeted. Well, sadly, he was right. He noticed odd behavior when his team was not able to log in one day. Servers were being encrypted, he recalled. The infiltration occurred by way of an administrator loading some new software onto basically a forgotten Windows 7 desktop that had been collecting dust in a closet for some time. So Matthew at Lang's, Dan at Payette, and Nick at Southern Louisiana Community College have all been through a ransomware attack. And it's likely many of you listening in today have also been through one or more attacks. Our customers have told us that it's one of the worst experiences they've gone through professionally. And Christina's going to tell you how each of these stories, Payette, Southern Louisiana Community College, and Langs, turned out towards the end of the webinar today. You know, understanding the human experience was one of the reasons we at Rubrik started a new organization, Rubrik Zero Labs. Zero Labs was founded to analyze the global threat landscape, report on emerging data security issues, and then give organizations research-backed insights and best practices to secure their data against these pervasive cyber threats. Now, Chris Krebs, the former director of CISA and the chairman of Rubrik's CISO Advisory Board, has said that we often overlook the psychological dimension of cyber attacks and the chaos that tends to follow after discovering an incident. So with that in mind, with Chris's idea in mind, Rubrik Zero Labs' first report is the state of data security. And that report digs into this idea about psychological impact even further. Now, to create a report, we gathered responses from over 1,600 IT and security decision makers at companies of 500 or more employees. Respondents were made up of approximately half CIOs and CISOs and half VPs and directors of IT and security. And the research was conducted in the US, UK, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Australia, Singapore, and India in July of 2022. Now, we've made available the full report as part of this webinar, or you can find it on rubrik.com. But here are some of the highlights. First, cyber attacks are absolutely on the mind of senior leadership. 98% of organizations reported at least one attack getting visibility by senior leadership, and the cyber attack issue has made its way to boards of directors. Ransomware attacks are so mainstream now that the United States commercial broadcast network CBS did a segment on their news show, popular show, 60 Minutes, just this year, all about ransomware. Anyway, back to the report. Nearly every leader surveyed experienced a cyber attack over the past year, and half reported a data breach, and another half reported facing a ransomware attack over the past year. Let's talk about what we found is on senior leadership's mind. First, a statistic not on the slide. Over 90% of respondents are concerned that they will be unable to maintain business continuity if they experience a cyber attack. And this is what's concerning senior management and boards of directors. Okay, 1/3 of respondents believe that their board has little to no confidence in their organization's ability to recover critical data and business applications after an attack. 3/4 of respondents reported that their organization is likely to consider paying a ransom, and half are very likely to pay the ransom. Now, here's what Chris Krebs was talking about. The weight of cybercrime is taking a toll. 96% of the respondents reported experiencing significant emotional or psychological consequences following an attack, ranging from worries over job security to loss of trust among colleagues. And about 1/3 of respondents reported leadership changes as a result of cyber attacks. So huge impact on the organization. And 1/3 of the leaders we surveyed said their IT and SecOps teams were either somewhat or not at all aligned when it came to defending their organizations. So bottom line, a lot of orgs feel they're just not ready. And the problem isn't going away, and cyber attacks are creating more uncertainty than ever. Okay, I'll switch gears now and turn it over to Kim, who's going to help you understand why traditional security measures are insufficient to deal with ransomware and cyber attacks. And then Kim will explain how you can take a new look and a different approach to data security.
All right, thanks, Robert. Good to speak to you all today. All right, so first off, I'd like to walk you through what typically happens during an attack, so you can see how it usually ends up playing out. All right, here it goes. See, attackers are penetrating perimeter defenses and they're locking down the data. And when that happens, you have two fundamental options. Option one, pay the ransom. Now, even if ransom demands are met, there's no guarantee that the attacker is going to provide the decryption key to unlock your data. And even if they do, that they'll provide it quick enough to get you back up and running as fast as your business requires. And if that doesn't happen, you end up paying the ransom. Now, option two, you can attempt to recover. And to do this, your IT and security teams will first try to turn to their backup data. But if that data is compromised by ransomware, you still may end up needing to pay the ransom. And even if you do have access to your backup, who's to say you can actually find the data anomalies to assess what applications are impacted? Could you find the last known clean copy of your data to recover? If you fail on both those fronts, guess what? Again, you may have to pay the ransom. So let's talk about that modern approach to data security rather than just having a backup solution and checking the box, how that can really help you answer these questions to recover your data safely and quickly. So you saw from Robert how despite investments in infrastructure security tools, cyber criminals are still getting through and they're taking down entire businesses. So these attacks are really shining a light on why it's so important to integrate data security into your data management platform and IT operations. It's important to take a zero trust approach to security, meaning trust no one and assume compromise, and to combine data security with infrastructure security to help fully secure your data and your business. Okay, so to do that, there's three necessary components, and Rubrik fulfills those requirements via SaaS-based Rubrik Security Cloud. And it's got three security pillars here, offering data resilience, data risk monitoring and observability, even integrating with popular SIEM and SOAR tools, including Microsoft Sentinel, to drive that collaboration between IT ops and SecOps. And then, of course, remediation and recovery of your data wherever it lives across enterprise, cloud, SaaS, plus the ability to avoid malware reinfection. And that's something that can be a real risk when all you have to restore from is a compromised backup. Okay, so when you think about being resilient, the first pillar, it's particularly relevant right now because, frankly, there's never been a more important time to focus on data resilience. We hear it from law enforcement, the FBI, CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and we even hear it from cyber insurance companies. But the thing is, legacy data protection solutions just weren't built to stand up to today's threats. So when you're assessing your cyber resilience, you really need to ask yourself questions like, can my global admin credentials be compromised? If everything becomes compromised, what is our fail-safe plan? Can my backups be discovered and seen by attackers if they were to get in? Okay, and then yes, I have data retention rules in place, but could they be modified or deleted by a threat actor, meaning that there'd be no data left to actually recover? So you really need to be able to protect your data. You need air-gapped, immutable access control protection, and we can provide that with Rubrik. Now, when we say air gap, a logical air gap is what's going to prevent data access and discovery. Encryption everywhere, that's something that's going to protect data at rest and in flight without impacting performance. Access control at every level, so that provides role-based access control and credentials protected by multi-factor authentication and time-based one-time passwords. Intelligent data lock, that prevents malicious mass deletion or even inadvertent deletion that can happen with human error. And this data security it's immutable by design. So it prevents unauthorized changes by storing data in a proprietary format and verifying integrity with continuous data checks. And finally, a zero trust retention lock. And that's going to prevent anyone from tampering with retention SLAs. And it utilizes the two-person rule for increased security. So all of this combined, it means that bad actors can't find the data because it's air-gapped. They can't change it because it's immutable. They can't see it because it's encrypted, and they can't access it because it's protected by MFA. And they can't mess with the rules because of retention lock. And even if they could, Rubrik would still save the day with intelligent data lock, which is going to keep all your data as a fail-safe for at least 7 days beyond the last admin action. But what's important to remember too is that securing the data isn't quite enough. You also need to be able to address data risks, and that means being able to answer some different questions like, when was the first entry of malware into our backup data? When did that occur exactly? Because I want to be able to restore my data to the absolute latest point in time before it was compromised, so I can minimize that data loss. Have there been any unusual deletions or modifications that are outside the norm? What's going on in our internal system data that could be an indicator of compromise? And then perhaps most importantly, what sensitive data, things like personally identifiable information, may have been affected if we're attacked? What's the potential exfiltration risk there? And for that, you've got data observability, our second pillar. So data observability sets out to search for ransomware, identify classified data exposure, and potential compromise. And so with ransomware monitoring investigation, we're using automation to detect data anomalies and encryptions, and even determine the type of infection and the scope of the attack. And as you know, as your volume of sensitive data just grows and grows, unwanted modification and exfiltration can expose you to greater risk of compliance failure, brand damage, especially when your actual visibility into where this data lives and who has access to it is limited. So our approach to sensitive data monitoring and management is to use over 60 built-in analyzers. We scan your data to help you better prepare for an attack, and then at the same time, meet regulatory compliance standards. And we talked about how it's definitely possible to reinfect production environments with the vulnerabilities that triggered an attack in the first place. And this happens often with legacy solutions. So when malware infection happens, it can then end up extending the time to remediate. And then it increases the risks, it increases the costs involved. So that's why Rubrik speeds up your incident response process by searching backups for known indicators of compromise with threat hunting. And these data observability tools, they integrate with automated recovery workflows. And that's important because at the end of the day, it's really all about whether or not you can actually restore your data quickly and get yourself back to that pre-attack state. And during any attack, the most common recovery questions there are things like, how do I streamline restores of those mission critical apps to minimize business interruption? How can I pinpoint the data that needs to be recovered? How can I limit my restores to just the data I need? And then, of course, how can I recover from a clean copy of my data? Now, our third and final pillar, data remediation, it does just that. So data remediation includes threat containment, where we're actually able to quarantine infected data. And that's effectively isolating the entire snapshot or individual files. You can then download that quarantine data to understand the root cause, the point of origin, and other details, and even control access to that data to prevent accidental reinfection. And in parallel with your forensic investigations, you can restore your applications, your files, your users quickly using predefined automated workflows for mass recovery. All right, so to really show you Rubrik's value here, I'm really excited to hand things over to Christina to introduce one of our newest features we announced in our winter release, which as a whole, I encourage you to explore on our website to get a real sense of the latest security innovations that we have for you for cyber preparedness. All right, over to you, Christina.
Thank you, Kim. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining our session. My name is Christina Avrionova, and I am also on the product marketing team here at Rubrik. So yes, let's take some time and talk about our latest offering, Rubrik for Cyber Recovery. Now, when you are hit with a ransomware attack, there are really two things you want to do. You want to be able to go back to business very quickly. You want to be able to restore and keep the business running. And of course, at the same time, you want to understand what has happened, when did it happen. You want to conduct your forensics. So with Rubrik Cyber Recovery, this is what we allow you to do. We allow you to restore your business operation using the last known clean state. You can take the output of ransomware investigation and understand when was the last clean copy so you can begin recovery. And at the same time, we allow you to move the data in an isolated environment so you can begin conducting out-of-band investigation, that you can start understanding when did the malware get in, when did the attack happen, and so on. Now, remember that statistic we shared with you a little while ago, that about 33% of executives and the chairmen of the boards believe that their organizations are not ready to recover from a cyber attack. Well, the other beautiful thing that Rubrik Cyber Recovery gives you is the ability to assess your cyber readiness. Again, by mounting the backup data in a separate environment, you can test, validate, and begin documenting the success of your recovery plans. You can create reports and you can share them with the executives so they know exactly how the situation will unfold. So in a nutshell, with Rubrik Cyber Recovery, you can recover faster and with confidence. You can test how your recovery plans will work with real live backup data. You can, again, mount this data in an isolated environment and you can perform your security assessments there easily. But really, the greatest thing about it is that you can, when you are hit with a cyber attack, you can begin restoring knowing your last clean copy. And at the same time, you can have in parallel those forensics investigations. But now I would like to pass it to my colleague, Kev Johnson, because he will share a great demo of Rubrik Cyber Recovery.
Let's take a look at what this looks like. This doesn't require any pre-building of any recovery plans. We can select any protected object for an ad hoc recovery, and if we need to, we can save this off as a recovery plan for those plans that you might need to repeat regularly. Once we've selected the objects to recover into our isolated recovery environment, or IRE, we get a brief description of what we're about to do, including a reminder to include any fundamental infrastructure services. Remember, this is all isolated, so there's no reaching out to production for DNS, authentication, or anything like that. We then select whether we're going to set up an IRE or if we want to do an in-place recovery. In-place recovery is what you'd use to bring all of the selected objects back into production as quickly as possible. With the relevant objects selected, we have a few options in terms of the point in time that we're recovering. By default, if there are any recommendations from ransomware investigation or threat hunting, we'll present the clean snaps by default. In this case, we're particularly interested in the snapshots that have been quarantined based on the results of a threat hunt. It's worth mentioning that once quarantined, these are unavailable for a regular administrator to restore. This helps to protect against accidentally reinfecting your production environment, but at the same time allows for a SecOps operator to recover for forensics in an isolated environment like this. We can obviously select any snapshots that we like, but being able to zero in on what you need without needing to go searching can really help you to save time if you're in firefighting mode. With the objects and the snapshots selected, we now need to select where we're going to instantiate the isolated recovery environment. First, I'll select the relevant vCenter server, data center, and vSphere cluster to use to provide the compute for the isolated environment, making sure that the isolated networks are presented to the hosts in the cluster. As we're using isolated networks, we have no need to change IP addresses and the like. We do have options to do this if we're overlapping with other sandboxes on the same isolated networks, for example. We don't need to specify storage, as all VMs are running off Rubrik, using the live mount capability. Our next port of call is to specify a recovery order. This enables us to ensure that the supporting infrastructure is ready before we start bringing up the application, database, web, etc. As you can see, we can also apply pauses between the different priority groups if this is required. Here, we're going to split our servers into the 3 groups. We have the option to execute post-recovery scripts as a part of this workflow too. This might be to trigger things like a malware scan, configure local logging. Remember, this is isolated, so you might not be able to get your application logs to your usual logging tool, or anything else. As you can see, these scripts can be PowerShell or Bash based. If the required script already exists on the server at the point that the snapshot was taken, we can specify its path here. Alternatively, we can either upload a file for Rubrik to push to the server, or we can simply paste in the script here. So we can see here the script that is going to get pushed to this server. The final thing that we need to do is to give this recovery a name. We also have the option, as I mentioned earlier, to save the details of the relevant machines, networks and the like as a recovery plan, so we can easily run through this process again in future with the same contents. Once we give our recovery plan a name, we hit confirm to start our recovery into an isolated recovery environment. We can monitor the recovery progress through to completion and drill into each recovery for more details. Once the recovery is completed, we can connect in any other tooling required. These might be vulnerability scanners, malware reverse engineering kit, memory dumps, and literally anything that's needed to serve the purpose of the isolated recovery environment. Obviously, we're talking about a very specific use case here, but there's nothing to say that you couldn't use this to test patches, upgrades, etc., or anything else. The final area I'd like to highlight is the reporting capability. So when we were building out this solution, one of the challenges that customers mentioned regularly was having that capability to prove that you're testing your recoverability. With this in mind, it's super simple to export reports showing all that you need to satisfy your CISO or your cyber insurance provider.
Okay, thank you, Kev. So yes, recovery is very important because can you afford to wait? Can your business afford to wait weeks, months? Because we know that usually this is what organizations are faced with when they try to recover from cyber attacks. Then now let me tell you the story. Continue the story, or tell you how the story ended for Lang's Building Supplies. Guess what? It took them 25 minutes to restore their virtual machines. There was 0 data loss. And it took them 24 hours to fully recover. The attack happened over a weekend, so on Monday, they were back in business. And as Matthew today, their CIO, will tell you, Rubrik is not just about recovery from ransomware. It is the difference between survival and non-survival in this new digital age. And now let's play the little video of Payet so we can hear how their story ended.
Cyber attacks are paralyzing events. If we had to restore from our traditional backup systems before Rubrik, it would have taken weeks to months to get everything up and running. Rubrik saved us from paying a ransom. It never occurred to our team to pay a ransom, due to our confidence in Rubrik's ransomware recovery capabilities and immutable backups.
And lastly, the South Louisiana Community College. Remember, their servers were being encrypted. So with Rubrik, they paid $0 in ransom. And there was $0 data loss. And they were back in business for 2 hours. It took them 2 hours to fully recover. So yes, the students had to go back to class and they had to continue taking their exams. But as their director of IT, Nick Pietre, will tell you, without Rubrik, recovery could have taken weeks, which is exactly what happened to another college in Louisiana. They were completely out of luck and spent weeks recovering. Our situation was 100% contained in 2 hours. Yes, Rubrik makes that possible. And we have over 4,500 customers across so many industry. And yes, everybody's 100% protected. I invite you to go to rubric.com and you can read more customer success stories. You can watch more customer testimonial videos, and you can familiarize yourself in depth with Rubrik Security Cloud. And on that note, actually, we would like to thank you for attending our session today, and we will open the floor for questions. Thank you.
We'd like to open the webinar up for Q&A and encourage attendees to submit questions using the chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen. So why don't we jump on in and address some of our questions. So that presentation is some excellent information, but can you quickly summarize what you mean by data security? This question is for Robert.
Okay, thanks, Eric. So like Kim mentioned in the presentation, you invest a lot of money in everything from endpoint to network to database security. But your investments in security don't guarantee you won't be attacked. Security is risk mitigation, not risk avoidance. And any organization will invest their security dollars differently. But what we're talking about with data security is you've invested in prevention, you've invested in detection, and you've invested in investigating cyber attacks. But have you invested in making sure that your data is backed up and saved? All of your data is safe from attack? Can you look at your backup data to see if you've been infected or been attacked? And are you able to recover quickly? So that's what we mean by data security, as opposed to infrastructure security.
Great, thank you. So what has Rubrik found is the biggest mistake that organizations make when it comes to data security?
Oh, well, that's a good question. The biggest mistake is that people don't, well, I think the research alluded to this too. People don't know if they can recover, right? They don't know how secure their backup data really is. And we put a facility within our product that continuously monitors the security of the Rubrik system itself, and actually gives you a score and gives you recommendations on how you can improve your score in 5 discrete areas of the Rubrik system. Everything from 2-factor authentication to all my SQL databases being backed up. We can scan your environment and see what's being backed up and what's not. You can create new databases or new file systems, and we can back them up automatically or not. So it's really assessing whether you're prepared to restore.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, can Rubrik assist in recovery of DB2 or SAP HANA?
Yeah, we support both. We support all the major databases and many of the minor ones as well.
Thank you. Does Rubrik protect on-prem data or also data in the cloud?
We protect enterprise data in the data center. We protect data that is in the cloud, both hybrid cloud and cloud native workloads. And we also support Microsoft 365. We have a huge business in protecting Microsoft 365 footprints. So all of the above.
Thank you. Can you explain a little more how Rubrik provides immutability?
Okay, so when we talk about immutability, by definition, that means the state is set or it's inflexible once it's constructed. That's what immutability is. So in other words, nothing can be changed, right? When the founders first built Rubrik about 9 years ago, they created a purpose-built file system that was designed for backups. It's really similar to a lot of other companies out there who designed, like NetApp, when they were founded over 20 years ago, they built a purpose-built file system. Rather than use a general purpose file system, they created a purpose-built file system that was just for a file server. So they're able to optimize around those functions. Same way with Rubrik. The founders built a file system that was optimized to do one thing, do it really well, and that was backup. They didn't use a general purpose file system. So data managed by Rubrik is never available in a read-write state to any client. And this is true even during a restore. Since data can't be overwritten, that means even infected data that was later ingested by the rubric system cannot infect other existing files or folders. So that's what we mean by immutability.
Thank you. So what's next in the field of ransomware remediation?
Okay, so we talked about, and Kev demoed our latest feature, which is being able to simulate and practice a ransomware recovery. And just to recap, what we're doing is Rubrik has a feature that we call live mount. That is being able to access data as though it were live while it stays on the Rubrik system. So typically our customers use that for bringing up a copy of a SQL Server database from maybe a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago and running some tests on it, doing some patches. What we're doing with cyber recovery is you create a sandbox environment, you bring your networking, you bring your compute, and what you're able to do is you're able to live mount your storage into that environment off of Rubrik and then simulate a recovery or practice a recovery or do a real recovery where you're able to isolate the data that you want to recover, run some tests on it, make sure it's okay, and then actually recover it. So that's really the latest and greatest. We had a winter release. If you go to rubrik.com slash, I think it's winter release, we have a whole series of keynotes and breakouts that you can research about the new capabilities.
Great, thank you. So how many customers does Rubrik have?
Yeah, I think Christina mentioned we have 4,500 across a lot of different industries, very much mix of businesses. We're not really concentrated in one or the other. But what's also interesting is we're 9 years old this month, and we've been shipping products since I think March of 2015. And we announced back in August that we've surpassed $400 million in subscription revenue on an annual basis. And even among Silicon Valley standards, it's a phenomenal growth rate, performance rate. And we continue to grow in triple digits year after year. So the business is very healthy. I think it's testament to the proverbial, the expression, if you build a better mousetrap, people will beat a path to your door. I think I butchered that, but you know what I mean.
Definitely. So, and how long has Rubrik been in business?
We'll be 9 years old this year, shipping products since 2015.
Congratulations. So what's the best way to learn more about Rubrik in depth?
You know, we run a series of field events, and there's probably likely going to be one in your area in the not too distant future. We call it Camp Rubrik, and it's your chance as a person who would interact frequently with a data protection service, a backup and recovery service, to go, typically to a conference room, hotel, where we have a bunch of your peers there, and we give you an opportunity to actually play with the product and listen to some of our sales engineers give chalk talks about how Rubrik works. That's really the best way. It's very, you don't have to necessarily interact with sales, but you get to see the product live.
Sounds like a good series of events. Moving on to some further questions. The next question is, does this run on-prem and cloud?
Both. So the way Rubrik works is, traditional backup systems, to a large extent, they were all invented in the late 90s, early 2000s. They've sort of grown organically. You have a storage server, you have a catalog server, it becomes a nightmare of different specialized servers. Rubrik has a single device. Our software runs on a Rubrik device or can run on an HP server, a Dell server or a Cisco UCS server, doesn't really matter. And then you access that device through a web interface, actually over a SaaS platform. So there's an on-premises device that is accessed via our SaaS platform. That SaaS platform runs in Google Cloud, but you would not necessarily know that. And then you start taking backups on premises or in the cloud. The backups are stored on that device, whether it's a Rubrik device, Cisco, Dell, or HP server. And then over time, if you want, you can age off your backups when they reach a certain age, and you can then store them. Let's say your monthly backups that are over 2 or 3 months old, you can then start storing them on Azure, AWS, or Google. So you only have as much on-premises storage as you believe you need to do backups that need to be restored immediately. So the system also backs up data that's in the cloud to the cloud.
Thank you. And just to verify that cloud, the choice of cloud provider is very flexible. You can choose Amazon or Azure or Google Cloud or whatever other provider you want.
Yes, that's right, Eric. If you are wanting to archive your data, you can archive your data to AWS, to Google, or to Azure. You can also subscribe to a Rubrik hosted cloud vault. We call it Rubrik Cloud Vault. That storage is actually in Azure, although it is physically and logically isolated from your Azure account. So we're taking backups, but the backups are not stored in your Azure account. That gives an extra layer of security.
Great, thank you. The next question is, does it also have privacy features, such as reporting and so on, that aids in the privacy compliance objects of the company?
Yeah, Rubrik has a pretty strong multi-layer defense. We go so far actually as to have security features that if there are many features that require a 2-person rule. We also have this interesting feature that, let's say somebody internally, a malicious insider, or somebody in the unlikely event, an external person gets access to your Rubrik system, deletes something or wipes out a very large data set. It's not really going to get deleted until you get a call from the Rubrik support organization who, is monitoring your system. They're going to call you and say, hey, did you really, really want to delete all of the data on this Rubrik device? And you're like, what happened? What happened? So it's almost impossible to lose data. I can't say impossible. The lawyers would probably scold me, but it's very, very, very difficult to lose backup data once it has been written to a Rubrik system.
Thank you. The next question is, does your software as a service platform support products like Axway? We want to control how we access the web UI and so on, and do not want to leave any open holes in our firewall.
I am not familiar with Axway, but that is a good question to, if you engage with Rubrik and one of our sales engineers, they can run that question up the flagpole and get back to you.
Great. Thank you again, Robert and panel, for that amazing presentation. And thank you everyone in the audience for joining us today for this excellent webinar, and enjoy the rest of your day.